Good morning. Today we're going to study about the menstrual cycle, the complete procedure of menstrual cycle. Okay, I'm going to share you a small PPT and we'll start it. Yeah, here our topic for today, the menstrual cycle. By definition, what do you mean by menstrual cycle? Menstrual cycle, in generally, what you know is like a PV bleed. Bleeding through pervaginally, which is periodical, right? Which occurs for every female from puberty until the menopause. Okay. Once again, I'm repeating the definition. That is nothing but a periodic discharge of blood and tissue from the uterus, starting from the puberty until the menopause. Okay. This is the menstruation. So, here in this diagram, you can just see this is the uterus. The cursor where I am placing is the uterus, and this is the endometrial layer which sheds and exits out through vagina in the form of a blood. So that is nothing but a menstrual bleed. Okay, yeah. And let us see some few normal parameters. What is the normal length of menstrual cycle? As per the FIGO, the normal length of menstrual cycle is somewhere between 24 to 38 days. And what is the duration of bleed? The bleed occurs starting from 2 days to a maximum of 8 days. And the amount of blood loss in a single menstrual cycle is somewhere around 20 to 80 ml. On an average, around 40 to 50 ml. Okay. Yeah. So, the menstrual cycle, the complete phase is divided into two halves, the first half and the second half. The first half of the menstrual cycle is also known as the follicular phase or the proliferative phase or the estrogenic phase. And the second half of the menstrual cycle is called as secretory phase, progesteronic phase or the luteal phase. See, just mugging up this is fine, but we need to learn according to the concepts. So what I feel is just keep in mind for now that the first half of the menstrual cycle is called as so and so, the second half of the menstrual cycle is called as so and so. But by the end of this lecture, you need not memorize this. That gets automatically into your brain, like which phase is proliferative, which is progesteronic. Everything will be clear. Okay. And the menstrual cycle that doesn't start directly from the uterus or something. Okay, menstrual cycle starts from the hypothalamus. Okay, the hypothalamus. What happens? The hypothalamus releases GnRH. GnRH is nothing but gonadotropin releasing hormone. Okay, this gonadotropin releasing hormone, this gets released in some particular pulsatile fashion. Okay, if this GnRH is released continuously, that doesn't trigger the menstrual cycle. So that's not going to happen. The female doesn't bleed. But if it is in pulsatile fashion, only when this particular GnRH acts on the anterior pituitary. Okay. And this anterior pituitary releases follicular stimulating hormone. This follicular stimulating hormone, which is released by the anterior pituitary, acts on the ovarian granulosa cells. See, in the name itself, ovarian granulosa cells, the granulosa cells of the ovary. Okay. And after once the FSH acts on ovarian granulosa cells, it releases two substances. One is estradiol E2 and the second is inhibin B. Okay. Among these two, estradiol, that is nothing but our E2, which is useful for the proliferation of endometrial glands. Okay. See, the endometrium is present in the uterus, right? The endometrial lining and all. So the proliferation of endometrial cells. So what is helping for the proliferation of endometrial cells? Estradiol, okay, E2. And this estradiol and this inhibin B, both together helps in increasing of luteinizing hormone, LH. Okay, estradiol and inhibin B both. But this action is predominant. The increasing of luteinizing hormone is predominantly done by estradiol, E2. Okay, and what we're gonna see one more, inhibin the suppression, right? Once if these estradiol and inhibin B are more in number or more in quantity, what they do is they inhibit the follicular stimulating hormone. Okay, they inhibit the FSH. So this inhibin B predominantly inhibits the follicular stimulating hormone. Hope this is clear. Next, we'll move to the next slide. See, here is how you can study this menstrual cycle and all. The hormones released by anterior pituitary and the ovarian cycle, the ovulation taking place on the day 14 and all this will be clarified, but we need to just for a while wait for a while. Okay, let us start. Until now, what and all we studied? Hypothalamus is releasing GnRH in pulsatile fashion, which is acting on the anterior pituitary. This anterior pituitary is secreting follicular stimulating hormone. This follicular stimulating hormone, going towards the ovary and acts on ovarian granulosa cells, and it is secreting estradiol as well as inhibin B, right? And we have studied one more point as well, that these both are helping in increasing of luteinizing hormone. Yeah. So what's happening now? There are three particular actions of luteinizing hormone. Let us see those three functions of luteinizing hormone. First one is LH surge, LH peak, and ovulation. Like these three together happens. So what do you mean by LH surge? Surge is nothing but sudden rise, the sudden increase in the level of luteinizing hormone. When does this occur? This occurs somewhere around 32 to 36 hours before ovulation. And the next phase is LH peak. What happens? The LH peak is nothing but the the minimum amount of LH required for ovulation. So if this particular amount of LH is present, then compulsorily ovulation gonna takes place. Okay, that is somewhere around 75 nanogram per ml, and this occurs at 10 to 12 hours before ovulation. Okay, and final step is ovulation. Next is there'll be one more important question. What they're gonna ask is, what should be the estradiol level, E2 level required for the LH surge? So that is 200 picogram per ml, and which should at least sustain for 48 hours. Okay, if this estradiol level is near or more than 200 picogram, at least 200 picogram, and that value should sustain for 48 hours only when the LH surge will takes place. Next, the second action. Let us come to the second action. So hopefully the first action is clear. Now we are moving to the second action. So what happens in the second? This LH acts on the theca cells, and these theca cells will act on androgens, and they convert them into estrone by the process known as aromatization, and the enzyme which is helping for this aromatization is known as aromatase. Okay, and this estrone is E1. This estrone is mostly present in the obese female. Okay, mostly find in adipose tissues. So obviously adipose tissues is more prominent in the heavy female, bulky fat female. So that's going to take place. And let us see the third step. What is our third step? Is this luteinizing hormone acts on the granulosa cells, and which secretes progesterone. See, this progesterone, which is produced by the luteinizing hormone, is useful for the mid-cycle FSH surge, which helps in the maturation of follicles. See, in the name itself, you see FSH, follicular stimulating hormone. What should be its function? They should stimulate the follicles, right? So stimulation of follicles is nothing but making them mature. So in the mid-cycle, this progesterone, which is secreted by the luteinizing hormone, helps in the mid-cycle FSH surge, so that it reaches the final maturation of follicles. Okay, see, once the ovulation is done, the ruptured follicle is known as corpus luteum. Okay, ovulation is done, and this ruptured follicle which is present is known as corpus luteum. Okay, this corpus luteum, if you see this looks yellow in color. What is the reason why this is yellow in color? The reason behind it is that contains a pigment known as carotene. So that is the reason this corpus luteum is yellow in color. And this corpus luteum is supported by whom? This corpus luteum is supported by luteinizing hormone. Okay, it should be very clear. This point is also very important. They'll be asking you, the corpus luteum is supported by, the non-gravid corpus luteum is supported by, then your best answer would be luteinizing hormone. Okay, In future classes, we'll be learning about the gravid corpus luteum as well. But for now, just remember the non-gravid corpus luteum is supported by luteinizing hormone. Okay. Next, this corpus luteum that doesn't keep quiet. That secretes some hormones or substances. Okay. It secretes 4 hormones in a pregnant female and 3 hormones in non-pregnant female. So let us see, first of all, what are those 4 hormones secreted in the pregnant female? It secretes estrogen, that is nothing but our estradiol, E2. The second is progesterone. Third is inhibin A. The inhibin A, and fourth is relaxin. Okay, these 4 are secreted in pregnant female. But if a if a female is non-pregnant, in this, the corpus luteum secretes only 3 hormones. What are those? The same, except relaxin. What are these? Just tell me. This is nothing but our estradiol E2. The second is progesterone, and the third one is our inhibin A. Okay. Hope these points are also clear. Next, progesterone. We all know that is nothing but a smooth muscle relaxant. This progesterone, which is secreted by our ruptured follicle, nothing but our corpus luteum. This has few functions. What are those? One is stabilization and supporting the endometrium. This is supporting our endometrium. Next is vasodilation. By doing vasodilation, what's happening is that is increasing the blood supply to endometrium. And the last and the third function is secretion of glycogen and lipids. Okay, these are the 3 functions of progesterone. This glycogen and lipids, what they do, they are secreted and they are stored in the tiny numerous vacuoles in a watery form or a liquid form. This which provides nutrition for the fertilized ovum approximately for the first 3 to 4 days. Okay, the 3 functions, let us repeat the 3 functions of the progesterone, or the actions of progesterone. Those are nothing but stabilization and support to the endometrium. Second is vasodilation, that is nothing but the increasing in the blood supply to the endometrium. And the third one is secretion of glycogen and lipids. This glycogen and lipids we already studied, that is useful to provide nutrition for a fertilized ovum for 3 to 4 days approximately. Yeah, and the activity of this corpus luteum is maximum on day 8 post ovulation. Okay, 8th day post ovulation, or if the cycle is regular, approximately if you think a female has 28 days menstrual cycle, a regular cycle. So in 28 days menstrual cycle, obviously the second half of the cycle is always fixed, so that is 14 days. So the day of ovulation is day 14, and the day at which this progesterone level is maximum is 14 plus 8. That is nothing but 22. That is day 22 of a regular menstrual cycle, or 8 days post ovulation. This would be more precise. Okay, this is the exact answer. In this particular day, the activity of corpus luteum is maximum, and we already studied, right? What and all. Once if the level of this progesterone increases and it reaches a minimum level of 3 nanogram. Once if it reaches 3 nanogram, what happens is it gives the negative feedback to the luteinizing hormone. Okay, until now it was absolutely fine. The luteinizing hormone, it was supporting this corpus luteum, and this corpus luteum was providing our progesterone, and this progesterone level was increasing. And once if it is day 22 of a regular menstrual cycle, or 8th day post ovulation, what is happening? It reaches a maximum level of progesterone, or at least 3 nanogram to be more precise. If it is 3 nanogram, then obviously this progesterone is giving negative feedback to the luteinizing hormone. Okay, once if it gives negative feedback to the luteinizing hormone, what happens? This luteinizing hormone stops supporting the corpus luteum. So now corpus luteum will degenerate. If this corpus luteum gets degenerated, so obviously all the 3 substances secreted by the corpus luteum will also decrease. What are those 3 which was secreted by this corpus luteum? The estradiol, the progesterone, and the inhibin A. Right, all these 3 are also getting decreased. and this degenerated corpus luteum. Now the corpus luteum got degenerated, and this is called as corpus albicans. Alba means white, so corpus albicans is white in color, whereas the normal corpus luteum was yellow in color, and that was due to presence of what? Carotene. Okay, very good. Let's move to the next slide. Yeah, now we're going to see what are the events which are happening due to the fall of progesterone. The progesterone levels are come down. So due to which what and all things are happening, we need to see. This is just opposite to the action of progesterone, right? Let us see. First of all, what is the function of progesterone? I'm moving back, okay? The action of progesterone was supporting and stabilizing the endometrium. So now the progesterone levels are low. So no support to the endometrium. Next, it was doing, the other function was vasodilation, so that it was providing sufficient amount of blood to the endometrium. But now the progesterone levels have come down. So what's happening? Vasoconstriction. So obviously they'll be decreased in blood supply to endometrium. And eventually, if the endometrial layers doesn't get sufficient blood supply, they undergo apoptosis. That is nothing but a programmed cell death. And this, the endometrial tissue will, degenerate. Next, due to this vasoconstriction, there'll be a chemical substance known as prostaglandin F2 alpha. What does it, what is the function of it? That does myometrial contraction and endometrial peristalsis. Myometrial contraction and endometrial peristalsis. Due to this phenomena, the endometrial tissue will expel out. And the last function is the release of metalloprotease enzyme. So what does this metalloprotease enzyme does? This particular metalloprotease enzyme, this causes the ischemic necrosis to the endometrium. Obviously the endometrium tissue is getting dead. There's nothing but it is undergoing necrosis. And does the female menstruate blood, or is she just shedding out the endometrial tissue directly, or the endometrial layers? Obviously blood. So how this is happening? This endometrial tissue is undergoing a process called as fibrinolysis, and this is converted into the blood, which is expelled out pervaginally. Okay, this blood is expelled out by, we already studied, right? What was that? The myometrial contraction and the endometrial peristalsis. So due to these movements, this blood is expelling out. And there'll be one important question which they ask is, the menstrual blood, is it arterial blood or venous blood? Then the best answer would be that is an arterial blood. Okay, always remember the menstrual bleed is always arterial. Next, we're going to see there are few more events occurring due to fall of endometrium, that is nothing but our estradiol and inhibin A. So once these gets fall, they'll be again increasing in the FSH, follicular stimulating hormone level, so that the follicles again grow for the next menstrual cycle. Okay, let us move forward. See, the follicles, the ovarian follicles, how do they grow? They grow approximately 2 mm per day, the size of 2 mm, 2 millimeter per day. Initially, there are many follicles and all of them starts growing. But if one follicle among them reaches a size of 14 millimeter, 14 millimeter, then that follicle which attained a size of 14 millimeter is called as captain follicle, or a dominant follicle, or a leading follicle. So why we call this as a captain follicle, leading follicle, and a dominant follicle? The reason behind it is, once this 14 mm size, a follicle reaches a size of 14 mm, all the other follicles, they start regressing. So the size of the other follicle starts coming down. And usually this follicle will rupture. The leading follicle, obviously that is the one, right, which need to rupture. The rupture such as at a size of 18 to 22 meters, 20, let us say approximately 20 mm size. Okay, and in a female, we have 4 natural estrogens, namely E1, E2, E3, E4. Yeah, this is fine. So E1, One, one, estrone. This is formed by the process of aromatization. You already know, with the help of an enzyme called aromatase, which was a function of our luteinizing hormone, LH. Okay, I hope that was clear. If you have concentrated well before, you would have noticed it. If not, just go back a bit and you can see the particular point. And the second one is E2, estradiol. This estradiol E2 is the main estrogen in the reproductive age female. Okay, in all the reproductive age females, the predominant estrogen is E2. And if a female is pregnant, or so in pregnant females, what are the estrogens predominant? Those are nothing but E3 and E4. Estriol and estetrol. Tri is nothing but 3 and tetra is nothing but 4. So estriol and estetrol. These are the 4 estrogens which are present in a female. Estrone, estradiol, estriol and estetrol. E1, estrone is formed by aromatization. E2, estradiol is formed by what? I mean, it's not formed by. I mean, the main point is this is the main estrogen present in the reproductive age of the female, and the E3 and E4 are produced by the placenta in a pregnant female. Yeah, let us move to the next slide. See, uh, I have already said you that the second half of the menstrual cycle is fixed. So what do I mean by that? The second half of the menstrual cycle is fixed. Just see, the second half of the menstrual cycle is fixed. It seems it means if the ovulation is occurring, just it has only 14 days for the bleeding. So that is why the second half of the menstrual cycle, this 14 days is always fixed, despite of the length of the cycle. So what I mean to say is, if, for example, a female has a menstrual cycle of 60 days, let us think a female has a menstrual cycle of 60 days. So, and you want to know the day of ovulation. So how would you calculate? I have already told you the second half is fixed. So just from the length, that is nothing but 60 days, just subtract these 14 days. So if you subtract these 14 days, so what you're gonna see, I mean, what you're gonna get? You're gonna get the day of ovulation. That is nothing but on the 46th day. Okay, because you have subtracted 14 from the 60. So this is your day of ovulation. Okay, and so obviously I have explained you in this particular point how to calculate the day of ovulation. So for any, I mean, if I give any regular, I mean, length of a female cycle, any menstrual cycle length, then you guys can easily calculate the day of ovulation. How are you going to calculate? You're going to just subtract 14, 4 from the cycle length, and you're going to get the day of ovulation. And they might be, few examiners might ask a bit trickily. How? Just see, try to imagine. They might ask you, for example, there is a regular menstrual cycle of 28 days, and they're going to ask you on which particular day the progesterone level would be maximum. So all of us already knows the level of progesterone, I mean the maximum level of progesterone will be on the day 8 post ovulation. Okay, so if the cycle length is 28, we're going to subtract 14, and the 14 will be the day of ovulation. And to this particular 14, we're going to add 8, because 8 days post ovulation, right? So 14 plus 8 comes 22, and this 22nd day or the 22 day has the maximum level of progesterone. Hope I have made clear. If you guys have any doubt in this, I can even explain you once again. Yeah, and I have asked you these both questions. See, by this explanation, now it would be very easy. If the female has a cycle of 50 days, so the day of ovulation would be 50 minus 14, 36. And if it is 28 days, then obviously minus 14, and that would be 14 days. And if the maximum level of progesterone, the particular day is given, then just subtract 8, and you're going to get the, I mean, the examiner can ask in many ways. You should just have the concept like cycle second half is fixed. This is 14 days. So you'll get the day of ovulation. Once you get this day of ovulation, you're going to add 8, and this particular 8th day is the maximum level of progesterone. Okay, yeah, I have told you that in the start that these the first half and the second half has all these names, right? So now you're gonna easily think, I mean, you can correlate the stuffs. See how that is possible. First half is called as follicular phase. How am I saying? Because in the first half the follicles are getting matured. Okay, they are getting, I mean, increasing in size, so that is the reason we are calling it as follicular phase. Okay, and this is also called as proliferative phase. Why? What is the reason behind it? The progesterone, which is a predominant hormone, was helping for the, sorry, the proliferation, what to say, that our estradiol E2 was helping for the proliferation of endometrial glands or the endometrial tissue. Okay, E2 estradiol, which was predominant in the first half of the menstrual cycle. And obviously estrogenic phase, because estradiol was predominant. Okay, is this somewhere, are we relating it properly? And hope so. And the second stage is nothing but secretory phase. Why we are calling it as secretory phase? Because we already know the progesterone, which was the, I mean, predominant hormone in the second phase. So that is why we call it as progesteronic phase. And that was secreting this what do you say, this glycogen and lipids. We have studied that point, if you guys remember. I mean, remember, this glycogen and lipids was useful for the, as nutrient, which provides nutrient for the first 3 to 4 days of fertilized ovum. And we also call it as luteal phase, because the corpus luteum, this corpus luteum was providing us the progesterone, right? So see, we can correlate everything. That's what I wanted to say. We need not memorize, we can just correlate all the stuff. Hope so this menstrual cycle is clear for you. And thank you. In the next video I'll be dealing with these abnormalities of menstrual cycle, amenorrhea to be more precise, primary and secondary. Thank you once again. Take care.